The planet Nereth 9 was silent. It was a place forgotten by time, covered in endless white snow and ice that never melted. The wind howled across the broken metal ruins of what was once a thriving colony. Now only two small figures moved through the storm, wrapped in torn blankets and trembling in the cold. Lyra and Nomi, two alien sisters, had lived here alone for almost a year. They were the last of their kind, or at least that's what they believed. Their people had left during the Great Evacuation, escaping the deadly freeze that came after the power cores failed. But the sisters were sick then, too weak to move, and when the ships took off, no one came back for them. The cold had a sound of its own. It whispered through cracks in the walls and crept into their lungs. Every breath they took made their chests ache. Nomi, the younger one, coughed softly, her voice thin and weak. "Lyra, I can't feel my hands," she said. Lyra pulled her close, rubbing her small fingers to keep the blood moving. "Hold on, little one," she whispered. "The storm will pass soon." But Lyra knew it wouldn't. The storm on Nereth 9 never truly ended. Inside the broken colony shelter, the fire was dying. The last few sticks of power crystal glowed faintly, giving off a dim blue light. Lyra stared at the small flame like it was her last friend. She had tried to fix the generator many times, but the circuits were frozen solid. Every night she prayed that someone, somewhere, would hear their signal, but no one ever did. The emergency beacon blinked weakly in the corner, a single red light flashing once every 10 seconds. It had been sending a distress call into the void for months. But space is vast, and nobody listens to the ghosts of dead planets. Lyra looked at her sister again. Nomi's face was pale, her lips blue, her breathing slow. The thin blanket around her was crusted with frost. Lyra took off her own outer coat and wrapped it around Nomi. Ignoring the pain in her own body, she pressed her forehead to hers, whispering softly, "I'll find a way. I promise." Outside, the wind screamed louder, carrying snow like knives through the air. It was not just the cold that scared Lyra. It was the silence that followed. Sometimes she heard strange echoes in the storm, like footsteps or metal scraping on ice. At first, she thought it was just her mind playing tricks, but once, she saw a shadow moving near the ridge, a tall shape that didn't belong to the storm. She told herself it was nothing, just the wind, but deep down, she knew something was watching them. Hours passed and darkness returned. The sisters curled together in the corner of the broken shelter. Nomi's breathing slowed even more. Lyra's hands shook as she checked the small oxygen reader. It blinked red. She knew what that meant. No air left, no power, no hope. Tears froze on her cheeks before they could fall. She looked at the small hologram frame beside the fire. It showed their parents, smiling, taken long before the war. "Mom, Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I tried to protect her. I tried." The hologram flickered and went dark. The fire went out moments later, leaving them in total darkness. Outside, the wind suddenly stopped. A strange light cut through the clouds, a beam of gold piercing the endless white. Lyra opened her eyes and crawled to the window. Her heart raced as she saw something she never expected to see again. A ship, breaking through the sky, its engines glowed bright blue as it descended toward the surface. For a moment she thought it was just her imagination, but then the ground trembled and snow whipped up in every direction. She grabbed Nomi and held her tightly. "Nomi, wake up! Someone's here," she said, shaking her. Nomi's eyes opened slightly, confused. "A ship?" Lyra nodded, tears mixing with frost on her face. "Yes, a ship. Someone came for us." She rushed to the outer door and forced it open. The storm hit her full force, freezing her skin, but she didn't care. Through the white blur, she saw the ship landing a few hundred meters away. It was small, maybe a personal craft, but its hull was marked with the symbol of the galactic forces. Her joy quickly turned into fear. That symbol meant humans. She remembered the stories her people told. The humans who started the war. The humans who left them to die. Her hands shook as she stepped backward. Maybe it wasn't a rescue. Maybe it was a cleanup team, coming to finish what they started. The ship's ramp lowered slowly. Steam hissing in the cold, a tall figure stepped out. Wrapped in a heavy survival suit, the visor glowing faintly. He moved carefully, scanning the area. Then he looked straight at her. For a long moment, neither moved. The only sound was the wind whispering through the ruins. Lyra's heart pounded. She didn't know whether to run or shout, but then, The figure reached up and removed his helmet. A human face looked back at her, tired, scarred, and full of something she hadn't seen in a long time. "Kindness, hey," he said softly through the storm. "You're not alone anymore." Lyra froze. Unsure if she should believe him, behind her, Nomi called weakly, "Lyra, who is it?" Lyra turned back toward her sister, tears in her eyes. I don't know," she whispered, "but I think he came for us." As the snow swirled around them, the human slowly stepped closer. In that frozen wasteland where no one cared anymore, a spark of warmth was returning, and with it, the beginning of something the galaxy had long forgotten: hope. The human man stood still in the blizzard, his breath turning into mist under the gray sky. His name was Commander Elias Gray, once a decorated soldier of the Galactic Forces, but that was long ago, before he walked away from the war, before he decided never to follow orders that killed the innocent again. Now he was here on a planet where no one should be, a place erased from every map, Nerath 9, the frozen grave of a forgotten colony. He had come because of a signal, a strange, broken distress call that appeared on his scanner 3 days ago. It was weak, almost lost in the static, but something about it felt alive, so he followed it across dead systems, through storms and silence, until he found this place. As Elias stepped closer, he saw her, a young alien girl standing near the ruins, her skin faintly glowing under the snowlight. Her eyes wide with fear, she looked fragile. Like she hadn't eaten in days. He could see another small shape behind her, a second girl, lying still inside the broken shelter. For a second, his heart froze. 2 survivors, children maybe, on a world everyone abandoned. He raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said, his voice rough but calm. "I'm here to help." Lyra didn't move, her hands trembling as she pointed a small plasma pistol at him. Her voice cracked as she spoke. You're human." Elias nodded slowly. "Yes, but I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't believe him. Not yet. Her people had suffered because of humans, because of the council that decided who lived and who died. To her, humans meant betrayal, and Elias could see that pain written in her eyes. Behind her, Nomi stirred weakly and coughed. The sound made Lyra turn her head for just a second. That was all the time Elias needed to step forward and grab her gun gently, pushing it down. "Easy," he whispered. "You'll waste your energy." He didn't take the weapon away. He just lowered it, then reached into his pack and pulled out a small container. Steam rose from it. The smell of warm nutrient broth filled the air. Lyra's stomach twisted at the scent, but she still hesitated. Elias didn't say anything. He just placed it near her and moved away. After a moment, she knelt down and tasted it. Her hands shaking, tears filled her eyes. "It's real food," she whispered. Elias smiled faintly. "There's more on my ship, but your sister needs heat first." He walked to the shelter door and glanced inside. The walls were cracked, frost hanging like glass on every surface. In the corner, Nomi lay under a blanket, her skin almost the color of ice. Elias knelt beside her, his soldier's instincts kicking in. He checked her pulse, weak but steady. "She's freezing," he said. "We need warmth now." Lyra's voice broke. "The generator's dead," I tried. "But it won't start." Elias looked around the broken room, then at the power core unit half buried in frost. He sighed. "I can fix it, but I'll need time." Outside, the storm roared like a living thing, shaking the walls. Elias worked fast, his gloves off despite the cold, his fingers burning with numbness. He tore open old panels, connected wires, and used his emergency heater to thaw the circuits. Lyra watched him silently, unsure whether to trust him. Every movement he made reminded her of the humans who once came here wearing the same uniforms. But there was something different about this one. He didn't shout orders, didn't act superior. He just worked quietly, like he cared. Hours passed, and finally, a spark flickered in the dead generator. The lights buzzed weakly, and for the first time in months, warmth began to fill the air. Nomi stirred, her lips moving. "Lyra?" "It's warm." Lyra fell to her knees beside her, holding her hand, tears running down her face. Elias leaned back against the wall. Exhausted but relieved, he smiled faintly. "Told you I could fix it, for a moment." The three of them just breathed, alive together in the faint glow of light. But peace on Nerath 9 never lasted long. As Elias adjusted the generator's control screen, his scanner beeped. He frowned, tapping the display, movement detected. Multiple heat signatures closing in fast. Lyra saw his face pale. What is it? He looked at her, his tone suddenly sharp. You're not alone on this planet. Her heart stopped. The cold drones, she whispered, her voice trembling. Elias frowned. What are cold drones? Lyra pointed toward the ice-covered window. The machines they sent after the war, she said. They were programmed to destroy anything left alive. Outside, shapes began to move through the snow, metal legs scraping against the ice, glowing red eyes cutting through the darkness. There were at least 6 of them, maybe more, moving slowly toward the base. Elias grabbed his rifle and stood up. Stay inside and don't make a sound. Lyra's hands clenched around her pistol. You can't fight them all. He looked back at her, his expression firm but calm. I don't need to fight them all. I just need to keep them away. He moved to the doorway, the wind whipping his coat as he stepped outside. The blizzard swallowed him instantly, the sound of metal feet echoing all around. Lyra ran to the window, watching as he disappeared into the storm. Her heart pounded with fear. She wanted to believe he could handle it, but part of her was terrified. Terrified of losing the only human who had ever cared enough to come back. The first explosion shook the ground, snow blasting upward in a flash of light. Then came the sound of gunfire, sharp and distant. Nomi woke and whispered weakly, Is he coming back? Lyra swallowed hard, staring into the storm. I don't know, she said softly, but I hope so. Outside, a single flare lit up the night sky, a bright red light cutting through the snowstorm. It burned against the cold darkness, a signal, a warning, or maybe a promise. Whatever it was, it meant one thing. The fight for survival had just begun. The storm outside never truly stopped. It screamed across the frozen wasteland like a voice from another world. Inside the broken base, the air was warm again, but the fear was colder than ever. Lyra sat near the door, holding her pistol close, listening to the faint sounds in the distance. Every echo made her heart jump. Nomi was resting beside the generator, her small chest rising and falling slowly. The color was finally returning to her face, but her body still trembled. Elias stood by the window, his rifle in hand, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He hadn't said much since he returned. When the cold drones attacked, he fought them off with precision. 2 of them were destroyed, but he came back limping, blood staining the snow on his sleeve. Lyra tried to help, but he just shook his head. It's just a scratch, he said quietly. But she could tell it hurt. He looked tired, older somehow, like a man carrying a weight no one else could see. After a long silence, Lyra finally spoke. Why did you come here? Elias didn't turn to face her. Because someone asked for help. She frowned. No one even remembers this place. No one answers our signals. He looked at the blinking red light on the beacon and sighed. Then maybe I wasn't supposed to find you. But I did. For a moment, the only sound was the wind. Then Nomi stirred and whispered, You shouldn't have come. The machines will kill you too. Elias knelt beside her, his voice gentle. Let them try. She smiled weakly. Humans don't say that. He chuckled softly. I'm not like the others. Lyra lowered her pistol and stared at the man in front of her. Something inside her wanted to believe him. But her mind kept replaying the same memory. The evacuation, the ships flying away. The orders shouted through the intercom. Leave the infected behind. That phrase never left her. Her people weren't infected. They were scared, sick, and abandoned, and those orders came from the galactic forces, the same uniform Elias once wore. She finally asked the question that had been burning inside her. You were a soldier, weren't you? Elias nodded slowly. Yes. Lyra's voice hardened. Then maybe it was you who left us here. The words hit him like a blade. He didn't argue, didn't deny it. He just looked down. I followed orders, he said quietly, and I've hated myself for it every day since. Lyra froze, not expecting that answer. There was no pride in his voice. Only regret, he continued. Back then, they told us your colony was contaminated. They said saving you would spread the virus. But that was a lie, Lyra said sharply. There was no virus. I know, he whispered. I found the files later. It was a cover-up. They wanted this planet cleared for mining, nothing more. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. And you believed them, he nodded. I did. And I'll never forgive myself for that. For a moment, the room was silent again. The fire from the generator flickered against the walls. Nomi's breathing was slow but steady. Lyra stared at Elias, torn between hate and understanding. She wanted to scream, to blame him for everything. But when she looked at his face, tired, broken, full of guilt, she saw something she hadn't seen in any human before. Remorse outside, a strange hum echoed across the snow. Elias turned sharply, scanning his radar. "They're regrouping," he said. "The cold drones?" Lyra asked. He nodded. "Yeah, and not just the ones I fought. There are more coming from the East Ridge." Lyra's hands trembled. "They won't stop." "No," Elias said, loading his rifle. "They won't. They're still following the same old command, to cleanse the survivors." He moved toward the generator. Pulling a cable from his pack. "We need to move before they surround us," Lyra frowned. "But Nomi can't travel in this storm." Elias looked at her seriously. "If we stay here, none of us will live long enough to see the next sunrise." He connected his power cord to the generator, transferring the last of his ship's energy. The lights flickered again. Stronger this time. "What are you doing?" Lyra asked. "Charging the emergency sled," Elias said. "It'll carry her through the snow." Lyra looked at him in disbelief. "That's your ship's power. You'll be stuck here." He gave a small smile. "Better me than her." Lyra didn't know what to say. This human had no reason to help them. No promise of reward, no orders to follow, and yet he was risking everything for two alien strangers. Something inside her began to change for the first time in her life. She felt that maybe not all humans were monsters. As they prepared to leave, Nomi whispered faintly, "The cold drones." "They weren't always machines," Elias turned surprised. "What do you mean?" Her voice was weak, almost fading. "They were people, soldiers who were left behind too. Turned into metal by the cold." Elias froze, his mind spinning. He remembered the old experiments, the ones the council denied ever happened, soldiers fused with machines. Programmed to obey forever. He clenched his fists. "They turned their own into weapons." Lyra nodded. "That's why they never stop. They don't even know they're alive anymore." Suddenly, the radar beeped again, louder this time. Elias looked down and saw multiple signals closing in fast, dozens of them moving in perfect formation. Lyra ran to the window and gasped through the snow. Hundreds of red eyes glowed in the darkness. The ground trembled as the machines advanced. They weren't just hunting, they were marching. Elias grabbed his rifle, his eyes hardening. "Get Nomi on the sled," he said. "And don't look back," Lyra's voice shook. "What about you?" He gave her a small, tired smile. "I'll slow them down." As the door opened, the freezing wind howled into the room. Lyra looked back one last time. Elias stood in the doorway, the storm swirling around him like ghosts of the past. Behind him, the lights flickered, and outside, the red eyes drew closer. The shadows of the past were coming for them again. But this time, the human didn't run. The storm outside had turned into chaos. Snow whipped in every direction. Lightning flashed across the black sky, and the ground shook with the heavy steps of the cold drones. Their red eyes glowed like demons moving through the white. Each machine was built from steel and hatred, programmed to erase anything that breathed inside the broken base. Elias finished locking the last panel on the emergency sled. It hummed softly as power flowed into it, the small platform glowing faintly blue. Nomi lay strapped in safely, her body wrapped in thermal sheets. Her eyes barely open, Lyra stood beside her, trembling, not from cold but from fear. Elias loaded his rifle. Checking the last of his ammo, he had 12 rounds left. One grenade and a knife, not much against an army of machines. But it was enough to make them bleed. If machines could bleed at all. Lyra looked at him, her voice soft but firm. "You can't fight them alone." He glanced back at her, a faint smile on his tired face. "You'd be surprised what one person can do when he has something worth protecting." Lyra shook her head. "You're going to die out there," Elias replied quietly. "Then I'll die warm, not frozen inside a cage of fear." The walls shook violently as the first drone slammed into the side of the base. Metal screamed under pressure and sparks flew across the room. Nomi stirred and whispered weakly, "They're here." Lyra grabbed her weapon, but Elias held up a hand. "You keep her safe. That's your mission now," she wanted to argue, but his eyes told her it wasn't up for debate. He opened the outer door and the blizzard hit him like a wall. The cold cut through his armor, biting into his skin. He raised his rifle and stepped into the storm, disappearing into the white. Lyra stood frozen for a moment, her heart pounding. Then she heard it. Gunfire, loud and close. echoing through the storm like thunder. Outside, Elias moved with the precision of a man who had lived too long in battle. He used the snow as cover, firing at the drones as they advanced. Each shot hit metal, sparks flying. One drone exploded, pieces scattering across the ice, but more kept coming, crawling through the blizzard like mechanical beasts. He rolled behind a fallen structure, breathing hard. His visor flashed red, temperature dropping fast. Power reserves low. He cursed under his breath fogging up the glass. "Come on, Gray," he muttered. "You've survived worse." Back inside, Lyra watched through the frosted window. She could see flashes of blue light in the distance. Each flash meant Elias was still fighting. She turned to Nomi, who was whispering softly. "He's buying us time." Lyra clenched her fists. "I won't let him die alone." She ran to the weapons crate Elias had brought from his ship and found a small plasma launcher. It was heavy, but she managed to lift it. Her hands shook as she aimed toward the door. When she stepped outside, the cold hit her instantly, freezing her breath, but she didn't stop. She followed the sound of battle, her boots crunching through the snow. When she found Elias, he was on one knee. Firing his last rounds, 2 drones lay burning beside him, but 4 more surrounded him. Lyra screamed, "Elias!" and fired the launcher. A bright blast tore through the storm, striking one of the drones and sending it flying into the air. Elias looked up, shocked. "I told you to stay inside." Lyra shouted back, "And let you die? Never." They fought side by side. He covered her while she reloaded, and she shielded him with energy bursts. The snow around them burned with blue fire, metal and smoke mixing in the air. It was chaos. Cold and beautiful at the same time. Lyra had never fought like this before. But every shot felt like vengeance for what the galaxy did to them. The drones kept coming, endless and merciless. Elias knew they couldn't win, not like this. He reached for the grenade on his belt and pulled the pin. "Lyra, run!" he shouted. She hesitated for a moment, then saw what he was about to do. He threw the grenade into the snow, and the explosion lit up the night like a second sun. The ground shook, drones shattered, and the wind screamed louder than ever. When the smoke cleared, Elias was lying in the snow. His armor was cracked, his visor shattered. Lyra ran to him and dropped to her knees. Pulling him up, he coughed, blood staining the snow. "Told you. I'd keep you warm." Tears streamed down her face.
"You're an idiot," she said. "A brave—"
"Stupid human." He smiled faintly. "I'll take that as a compliment." She helped him back to the base, both stumbling through the storm. By the time they reached the shelter, the generator lights were flickering again. Nomi reached out weakly. "You made it." Elias collapsed beside her. Breathing heavily, Lyra checked the sled. It was charged, the engine humming softly. They could finally escape. But when Elias looked at his scanner, his heart sank. A new signal was blinking on the radar. Stronger than before, more drones, hundreds this time. Moving fast, Lyra saw the fear in his eyes. "What now?" He took a deep breath. "We move now before they find us." Lyra grabbed the sled controls, and the door opened once more. The storm howled. But this time they didn't stop. As they slid across the frozen plains, the base behind them exploded. The cold drones tore through the ruins, searching for what remained, but Lyra didn't look back. Elias leaned weakly against the sled. His eyes closing, he whispered softly, "We'll find shelter, somewhere warm." Lyra nodded, though tears ran down her cheeks. "We will, I promise." Above them, lightning flashed again, and in that brief light, far across the frozen wasteland, a dark shadow moved, something larger than the drone, something ancient and alive. Its eyes glowed blue instead of red, watching them from the storm. The fight for warmth had only begun, and the cold was not the only enemy waiting in the dark. The sled raced across the frozen wasteland, slicing through the blizzard like a ghost in the night. Wind screamed in Lyra's ears as snow whipped across her face, but she didn't stop. Behind her, Nomi lay wrapped in blankets, breathing softly beside her. Elias sat hunched forward, his armor cracked, his hands trembling from the cold. They had escaped the burning ruins of the base, but the cold drones were still chasing them, their red lights glowing faintly through the fog. Each flash of light reminded Lyra that the nightmare wasn't over yet. The sled's engine hummed weakly. It had power, but not enough to go far. Elias kept checking the radar, watching the blinking dots grow closer. "They're gaining," he said quietly. Lyra tightened her grip on the controls. "Then we go faster." Elias shook his head. "The sled can't handle it." The core will overheat. I don't care, Lyra said firmly. I'm not stopping. The wind howled louder, carrying strange metallic sounds, the cries of the drones as they spread across the ice. For a moment, Elias looked up at the storm clouds above. They were glowing faintly blue, lightning curling through them like veins of fire. This place, he whispered. It's not just frozen. It's alive. Hours passed before they finally found what looked like an old mining tunnel buried in the ice. Lyra steered the sled inside, the echo of the engine bouncing through the metal walls. When the sled finally stopped, the silence felt heavy. Only the distant hum of machinery remained. Elias climbed off, wincing in pain. We'll rest here. Lyra helped Nomi off the sled, wrapping her tighter in blankets for the first time in days. They were safe, at least for now. The tunnel was ancient, rust covered the walls, and strange symbols were painted across the ceiling. Nomi looked around weakly. I've seen these before, Elias frowned. Where? She hesitated. In the data files from the colony. Before everything went dark. Lyra tilted her head. You read those files? Nomi nodded. Not all. Just enough to understand. Elias sat beside the small heater he'd brought. His visor glowed faintly as he checked his ship's logs again. The distress signal that led him here still puzzled him. It was old, too old to be sent by any living person, yet it kept repeating. Bouncing from satellite to satellite until he found it, he turned to the sisters. That signal, it wasn't random, was it? Nomi looked down, her hands trembling. Lyra frowned. What do you mean? Nomi hesitated, then finally spoke. I sent it. Lyra's eyes widened. You, what? Nomi nodded slowly, tears forming in her eyes. When you were out scavenging for food, I found an old relay station under the base, she said. I fixed it and used it to send a message. But that signal was encrypted, Elias said. Military-level code. Nomi nodded again. I found it in the colony's archive, the same code humans use for emergency rescue. Elias froze. You used a human code? Yes, Nomi whispered, because no one else would listen if it came from us. The words hit both of them hard. Lyra felt tears sting her eyes. Her little sister had risked everything. She hacked into human systems that could have killed her, to send out a message in their language. A message she hoped someone would hear. Elias looked at her gently. That's how I found you. Nomi smiled faintly. Then it worked. Lyra turned to her sister, her voice trembling. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have stopped me, Nomi whispered. You don't trust humans, and I understand why, but I had to believe someone would care. Elias sat quietly for a moment. Her words pierced him deeper than any wound. He had lived his whole life surrounded by people who only followed orders, and yet this small, fragile alien girl had done something brave and beautiful. She had believed in kindness when no one else did. Before he could say more, his scanner beeped sharply. He checked the screen and frowned. A new signal, strong, official, galactic patrol frequency. They found us, he said grimly. Lyra's heart sank. The drones? Elias shook his head. Worse, humans. The monitor flickered to life, showing a transmission message. A woman's voice filled the tunnel, calm but cold. This is Commander Voss of the Galactic Forces. Unauthorized transmission detected on Nerith 9. All remaining life forms are to be contained or neutralized. Lyra's fists clenched. Neutralized? That means us. Elias slammed his fist against the wall. They're sending a purge team. Nomi looked terrified. We just wanted help. Elias turned to her, his eyes burning with determination. They don't want witnesses, they want silence. He stood up. Loading his rifle again, Lyra grabbed his arm. You can't fight a patrol ship. He looked at her seriously. I'm not going to fight them, she frowned. Then what are you going to do? Elias took a deep breath. I'm going to show the galaxy what they're doing here. He connected his visor to his datapad, rerouting the patrol's broadcast signal in moments. A live feed spread across the galactic network. Images of the frozen colony, the abandoned shelters, the two alien sisters fighting to survive. And then, his voice. This is Commander Elias Gray, he said, his tone steady but fierce. The Galactic Council lied. They left innocents to die, and they're about to do it again. Lyra watched in disbelief as the feed reached millions across the stars. Her heart raced. For the first time, the truth was being spoken. The galaxy would see what humans did, and what one human was willing to undo. But the transmission didn't go unnoticed. The patrol ship orbiting above Nerath 9 locked onto their position. Warning lights flashed through the tunnel, alarms blaring. "Unauthorized broadcast detected," a robotic voice announced. "Terminating source." Elias looked at the sisters and smiled faintly. "You wanted someone to hear you," he said softly. "Now everyone will." Lyra's voice broke. "They'll come for us, I know," Elias said. "And I'll be ready." Outside, a massive shadow moved through the storm. The patrol ship's engines roared as it descended from the sky. Light cut through the blizzard like fire. Elias stepped forward, his weapon raised behind him. Lyra held Nomi close, whispering, "Stay with me." The snow turned red as the first blast hit the ground. The world shook, ice cracked, and the storm screamed louder than ever. But even as the darkness closed in, the message continued to broadcast through the galaxy. The secret behind the signal had been revealed. And now, there was no turning back. The sky above Nerath 9 burned red. The galactic patrol ship hovered like a metal god in the clouds, its engines rumbling through the frozen air. Searchlights cut through the storm, scanning the surface for movement. Elias watched from inside the tunnel, his face pale in the blue glow of his visor. Lyra stood beside him, gripping her blaster tightly. Nomi was still weak, clutching a small blanket, her eyes wide with fear. The transmission had gone viral. Across hundreds of systems, people had seen the truth. A forgotten planet, 2 alien sisters abandoned, and 1 human who defied his own kind to save them. But truth was dangerous, and those who exposed it never walked away free. Elias stared at the scanner, dozens of dots blinking closer. "They've deployed ground units," he said quietly. Lyra's voice trembled. "How many?" "Too many," Elias replied. "They'll reach us in minutes," Lyra turned to him, desperate. "We can still hide deeper in the tunnels." He shook his head. "No, they'll track the heat from the sled. There's nowhere left to run." The tunnel lights flickered as the snow outside trembled under the patrol ship's engines. Nomi whispered softly, "They're going to destroy everything, aren't they?" Elias looked at her and forced a calm smile. "Not everything, little one." He placed his hand on the control panel, rerouting the generator's energy to the comms array. Lyra frowned. "What are you doing now?" He answered quietly, "Finishing what we started." He began recording another broadcast. "This is Commander Elias Gray." His voice echoed through the tunnel. "I am officially disobeying Galactic Law 47B, which orders the destruction of all surviving colonies on restricted planets." Lyra stared at him in shock. "You're confessing to treason." He nodded. "Someone has to." He continued, speaking into the mic. "These girls, Lyra and Nomi, are proof of the Council's lies. They are not dangerous. They are not infected. They are innocent." Lyra's throat tightened as she listened. Every word he spoke carried pain and truth. Elias was not just fighting the drones or the cold anymore. He was fighting an entire system built on silence. The tunnel suddenly shook, dust raining from the ceiling. Elias checked his radar again. "They found us." Outside, the blizzard exploded into chaos as patrol mechs landed on the surface, their heavy feet cracking the ice. Lyra ran to the window slit and gasped. Dozens of armored soldiers moved across the snow. They looked like shadows wrapped in light. Each step they took echoed through the valley like thunder. Elias grabbed his rifle and handed Lyra another one. "If they come in, we hold the line," he said. Lyra nodded, trying to be brave, though her hands trembled. Her mind flashed back to the day their people were abandoned. Back then she hid while soldiers like these destroyed everything. Now she was done hiding. The first explosion ripped through the side wall. Sending shards of metal flying, Elias pushed Lyra down and fired into the smoke. A patrol drone burst apart, sparks showering the floor. The room filled with gunfire and heat. Lyra fired beside him, her face lit by plasma light. For a moment, they were not alien and human. They were soldiers fighting for survival. But the patrol forces were overwhelming. More drones stormed in, their cold eyes scanning for targets. Nomi screamed as one of them broke through the wall near her. Elias turned instantly, firing until his rifle overheated. He tackled the drone, slamming his knife into its core, tearing out the glowing chip inside. It collapsed with a metallic roar. He stumbled back, breathing hard. His armor scorched. Lyra ran to Nomi, pulling her close. You're okay," she whispered. Elias dropped to one knee, coughing, his visor cracked again. "Systems failing," he muttered. Lyra reached for him. You need rest. He shook his head. Not yet. Then the tunnel lights dimmed. Replaced by a crimson glow, a voice came through the loudspeaker, cold. Female and filled with authority. Commander Elias Gray. This is Commander Voss of the Galactic Forces. You are charged with treason, obstruction, and aiding alien fugitives. Surrender immediately. Elias looked up toward the voice and laughed bitterly. Hello, Voss, he said quietly. Still following orders? Her tone sharpened. You were a good soldier once, Gray. Don't throw your life away for these creatures. Elias's eyes darkened. They're not creatures, they're children. Lyra stepped forward, anger blazing in her eyes. You left us to die, she shouted toward the intercom. And now you want to erase the proof. There was a pause. Then Voss replied coldly. The council made that decision. Not me. Elias turned off the comlink, his jaw tightening. I've heard that excuse my whole life, he muttered. Not anymore. He walked to the generator and reconfigured it manually. Lyra frowned. What are you doing? He looked at her. I'm rerouting power to the transmitter again. The galaxy needs to see how far they'll go to silence the truth. Lyra shook her head. That's suicide, Elias smiled faintly. Maybe, but at least it'll mean something outside. The patrol mechs prepared their final strike, charging plasma cannons aimed directly at the tunnels. Inside, Elias activated the broadcast one last time. Images of the attack streamed live, flashes of fire, the sisters holding each other, the storm raging. Millions across the galaxy watched as the truth unfolded before their eyes. Nomi whispered softly, Elias, you'll die. He knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Not today, little one. Not while you're still breathing. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. Why are you doing this? You owe us nothing. Elias looked at her and smiled sadly. Because when I look at you, I see every order I wish I hadn't followed. The tunnel shook again, this time. The roof cracked open, revealing the sky above. Blinding light poured in as the patrol ship prepared to fire its main cannon. Elias stood tall in the center of the room, the broadcast camera still running. He raised his rifle toward the sky and whispered, You wanted silence? You'll get truth instead. The cannon fired. A beam of energy tearing through the clouds, the world turned white for a moment. Everything went quiet. No wind, no screams, just silence, and then the light faded in that silence. The broadcast continued across the galaxy. People saw it. The moment one man stood against the law to protect two lives. Elias Gray, the human who broke the law, had become something greater, a symbol. But down on the frozen world, the smoke was still rising. Lyra opened her eyes slowly. Coughing, Nomi lay beside her, alive, trembling. She looked around through the haze. Elias? She whispered. There was no answer. Only the faint hum of the broken generator. Lyra's heart sank as she saw his rifle lying in the snow, half buried and still warm. Outside, the storm began to calm. The clouds parted, revealing a faint sunrise, the first light this planet had seen in years. Lyra picked up the rifle and held it close, tears falling down her face. He broke their law, she whispered softly, but he gave us hope, silence. The storm that had raged for days was finally gone. The sky above Nereth 9 was no longer black, but a pale silver. The first sunlight in years broke through the clouds, shining weakly over the endless white. Lyra slowly opened her eyes. Her body ached, her hands were numb, but she could still feel the warmth of Nomi's small hand in hers. The tunnel around them was half buried in ice, smoke curling through cracks in the metal walls. For a long moment she didn't move. The sound of her heartbeat was the only thing that reminded her she was still alive. Elias, she whispered softly. Her voice echoed weakly through the ruined tunnel. No answer came, only the soft hum of the broken generator. She tried to stand but stumbled, her legs trembling. Nomi stirred beside her, coughing. Sis, are we safe? She asked weakly. Lyra brushed the frost from her sister's face and nodded, even though she wasn't sure. For now, she said, her voice breaking. For now we are. The sunlight slipped through the cracks in the ceiling. It touched something in the corner, a glint of metal. Lyra turned and froze. Elias's rifle lay half buried in snow. The barrel cracked, his name engraved along the side. Her heart clenched. She knelt down and lifted it gently. The metal was still warm. Tears filled her eyes. He was here, she whispered. He stayed until the end. Outside, The ice plain stretched endlessly. In the distance, columns of smoke rose from where the patrol ship had crashed. The explosion had damaged its core before it could escape. Now, twisted wreckage covered the snow. Glowing faintly in the dawn, the council's soldiers, those who survived, were gone, vanished into the storm. Only the sisters remained. Nomi looked up at the sky for the first time. She could see the stars again, clear and bright. Her small voice trembled. "Do you think people saw it? What Elias did?" Lyra smiled faintly through her tears. "They saw it, Nomi. The whole galaxy did." She looked toward the horizon. He made sure of that. Hours passed before the silence broke. A low hum filled the air. Distant but growing closer, Lyra tensed. Grabbing the rifle, a ship was approaching. Cutting through the morning light, its hull was sleek and silver, marked not with the council's logo but with a new one. A simple symbol of open hands. Nomi gasped, "It's not them." Lyra squinted, "No, it's someone else." The ship landed gently on the ice. A ramp extended and figures stepped out wearing rescue suits. The leader, a tall woman with silver hair, raised her hand in peace. "We're not here to hurt you," she said through her speaker. "We're from the Free Colonies Network. We saw the broadcast." Lyra didn't move, still holding the rifle close. The woman took off her helmet, her breath visible in the cold. "We came because of him," she said softly. "Because of Elias Gray." Hearing his name felt like a knife and a hug at the same time. Lyra's eyes filled again. "He's gone," she said. "He saved us, but he's gone." The woman's voice was gentle. "Then he did what no one else could." She looked around the frozen battlefield, her expression solemn. "The galaxy is changing," she said, "because one man broke their law." The rescuers wrapped the sisters in thermal blankets and led them onto the ship. Nomi looked out the window as they lifted off. Below, the wreckage of the patrol ship burned silently, and near the edge of the crater, something glowed faintly under the snow, a motionless figure half buried in ice. "Lyra," Nomi whispered. "Look." Lyra turned, her heart freezing. Through the glass she saw him, Elias lying still beneath the morning light, one hand outstretched toward the horizon. A thin layer of frost covered his armor, but his face looked calm, almost peaceful. Nomi began to cry. "We can't leave him." Lyra held her hand tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "We're not leaving him, Nomi. We're taking his story." As the ship rose higher, the sunlight touched Elias's armor. It shimmered faintly, reflecting like silver fire. The rescuers watched in silence. One of them whispered, "He defied the council, and people are calling him the human of Nerath, the one who brought hope to the cold." Lyra looked down until the world below faded into white. She whispered softly, "You gave us warmth when everyone else gave us cold." Her voice broke. "You showed us what it means to be human." Days later, word of Elias Gray's stand spread across every system. News channels repeated the broadcast again and again. Citizens from 1,000 worlds demanded answers. The Galactic Council tried to deny it, but the truth was out. The image of a wounded human standing against his own kind for 2 alien children became a symbol of rebellion. Statues were built, messages were sent, and new laws began to rise from the ashes of the old. Back aboard the Free Colonies ship, Lyra stood by the observation window. Nomi was sleeping peacefully, her health slowly returning. Lyra held Elias's rifle close to her chest. She whispered quietly, "You said the galaxy needed truth. Now it has it." She wiped away a tear and smiled softly. "Rest, Elias. We'll carry the fire for you." Outside, space stretched infinitely. Stars burned like embers, and the cold world of Nerath 9 shrank into the distance. But even as the ship moved away, a single light remained on the planet's surface. It flickered faintly through the snow, the last echo of a signal that refused to die. The beacon that once called for help now pulsed with a steady rhythm, a heartbeat in the ice, a reminder that one human's warmth could outshine the cold of an entire galaxy. And somewhere, across the stars, countless people watched that light. Some cried, some smiled, but all of them whispered the same name, Elias Gray, the man who broke the law and taught the universe what it truly meant to care. Hope had survived, and in the heart of the cold, it was burning brighter than ever.